She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to kneel in a filthy alley in the middle of Seoul at midnight, pressing both hands against a wound on a stranger's side while her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She wasn't supposed to be whispering "stay with me" to a man whose name she didn't know. A man whose face, even twisted in pain, was the most terrifyingly beautiful thing she had ever seen up close. She wasn't supposed to feel anything. She was a nurse. She had felt nothing in months. But his eyes found hers in the dark. And something in Joy that had been very, very quiet woke up. She didn't know yet who he was. She didn't know what he'd done, what he controlled, what kind of world she had just stepped into by choosing to stop. She didn't know that somewhere across the city, his girlfriend had looked at her ringing phone, seen his name, and set it face down on a marble countertop without blinking. She didn't know any of it. All she knew was that he was bleeding. And she was the only one there. That decision, that one quiet, instinctive decision, was going to change everything. For both of them. Welcome to Afro-K Romance Fairy Tale. On today's episode, you get a dose of betrayal, power, romance, love, unexpected encounters, and a beautiful beginning. If this is your first time here, make sure to like, subscribe, click the notification icon to get a reminder when new amazing stories drop, and send this story to friends and family who you think would love to watch it. And also tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now let's dive back into this amazing story. Joy Adeyemi had not come to Seoul looking for anything. That was the truth she told herself every morning when she woke up in her small rented apartment in Mapogu, made her instant coffee, and stood at the window watching a city that still felt like a foreign film she hadn't figured out yet. 28 years old. Lagos born. Church raised. The kind of woman people described as grounded before they got to beautiful, though she was that too. Deeply, quietly beautiful. The kind that didn't announce itself. High cheekbones, dark skin that caught light like it was made for it. Eyes that held everything she was thinking but only released what she chose to. She had come to Seoul on a 1-year trauma nursing contract with Yonsei Medical Center. Fresh start. That was what her mother had called it when she hugged Joy at the airport back in Lagos, holding on 3 seconds longer than usual. Fresh start. As if a new city could outrun the grief that had been sitting in Joy's chest for 8 months. Heavy, wordless, permanent. She had lost her father. Then, 6 weeks later, the man she thought she would marry had proven himself to be exactly the kind of person you should never love during your worst season. So she left. Not running. Just leaving. Seoul was cold in a way Lagos never prepared you for. Not just the weather. The silence between strangers. The way people moved through the city like they had all signed an agreement not to make eye contact. Joy found it strange at first, then comforting. No one was watching her. No one was asking if she was okay. She could just be. Invisible. Healing in the dark the way wounds do when you finally stop picking at them. She worked hard. Double shifts when she could get them. 14, sometimes 16 hours of controlled urgency. Triaging, stabilizing, the language of emergency that translated perfectly across cultures. In the trauma ward she was exceptional. Calm under pressure the way only people who have known real grief can be calm. Her supervisor, a stern Korean woman named Dr. Choi, had told her after her 3rd week, "You don't panic. That is rare." Joy had nodded and said nothing. She didn't explain that panic had simply used itself up elsewhere. That Tuesday night in November she finished her shift at 11:40 p.m. The kind of exhaustion that lives in your bones, not just your body. She pulled her coat on, wound her scarf twice around her neck, and took the back exit, the shortcut through the service alley behind the hospital that shaved 4 minutes off her walk to the bus stop. She had taken it a dozen times. It was always empty. It was not empty that night. She heard him before she saw him. A sound she recognized instantly. Not a groan, not a cry, something more controlled than that. The sound of someone using every remaining unit of willpower to stay conscious. She stopped, scanned the alley. And there, half-seated against the far wall beside a dumpster, was a man. Expensive coat. That was the first thing she registered. The kind of coat that cost more than her monthly rent. Then the white dress shirt beneath it, or what had been white. Now it was dark and wet down the left side. soaked through in a way that told her immediately, clinically, that this was not a small wound. She moved toward him before she finished deciding to. "Hey!" Her voice came out steady. Nurse voice. "Hey, can you hear me?" His head turned. Slowly. And his eyes, dark, sharp, the color of deep water, found her face with an focus that didn't match how much blood he'd lost. Most people this far gone had glazed eyes, drifting attention. His were locked. Precise. Even now. He said something in Korean. Low hoarse. "I don't understand," she said, already crouching, already pulling back his coat to see the wound. "I'm a nurse." Gon hoase. One of the 20 words she'd learned. "You need help." He caught her wrist. Not violently, but firmly. The grip of a man who controlled things, even things that were trying to save him. "Don't," he said. In English. Accented but clear. She looked at his hand on her wrist. Then at his face. Then at the blood soaking steadily through his shirt. "Sir," she said quietly. "I can see you're wound from here. If you let go of my hand and let me help you, you might live through tonight. If you don't," she held his gaze without flinching, "you won't." 3 seconds passed. He let go. She worked fast. Scarf off her neck, pressed hard against the wound. Left hand applying pressure. Right hand already on her phone calling emergency services. But he reached out again, and this time his voice was different. Not commanding. Something quieter than that. Something that almost sounded like a request. "No hospital." She looked at him. "You're bleeding through a knife wound in an alley at midnight. You need a hospital." "No hospital." His jaw tightened. "Please." That last word clearly cost him something. She could see it on his face. The way it landed differently than everything else he'd said. Like please was a word his mouth had forgotten how to make, and had just now remembered under pressure. She hesitated. Every clinical instinct she had said call it in. Get him on a gurney, get him under lights, hand him to a system and walk away. That was the job. That was the boundary. But there was something in his eyes that stopped her. Not fear. Park Seo-jin did not look like a man who feared hospitals. He looked like a man who feared what a hospital would bring to his door. What questions? What people? What consequences? She made a decision she would later replay 1,000 times. She put her phone away. "Fine," she said. "But I need supplies. And you need to tell me what happened." The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something darker than that. "You don't want to know what happened. Try me." He looked at her for a long moment. Like he was calculating something. Running numbers behind those impossible eyes. Then he said, "Do you know who I am?" "I know you're bleeding," she said simply. "That's enough for right now." Something shifted in his face. Subtle. The way a wall shifts when the ground moves beneath it. Imperceptible unless you're watching very closely. Joy was watching very closely. "Park Seo-jin," he said finally. Like he was testing whether the name would change her. Didn't. She didn't know it. Not yet. She was new to Seoul. She hadn't learned which names to be afraid of. "Joy," she said back. Just her name. Clean and simple. Then she pressed harder on the wound, and he exhaled sharply through his nose. "I need to get you somewhere with better light and a first aid kit that's bigger than what I'm carrying. Can you walk?" Yes. He couldn't. Not well. But he tried. That was the thing about him she would come to understand over time. Park Seo-jin would rather tear himself further apart than admit a limitation. He stood, and his legs held, barely, and she ducked under his arm without asking permission and took part of his weight against her shoulder. He went very still for a moment when she did that. Like no one had ever done it before. Like the simple act of a person putting themselves under his arm to keep him upright was something so foreign it required a moment to process. She didn't notice. She was already moving. She took him to her apartment. Later she would ask herself why. The hospital was right there. There were clinics. There were options. But something in her, that deep, instinctive part that her mother always called your stubborn grace, had already made the choice before her brain caught up. He needed quiet. He needed clean hands and steady ones. He needed someone who would look at the wound and not the man. She could be that. Her apartment was small, warm. It smelled like shea butter and the jollof rice she'd made 2 days ago and the specific coziness of a woman who had made a foreign space into something that felt like her. Unkra throw over the couch. A small photo of her mother on the windowsill. Plants on every surface that got light. She sat him on her bathroom floor, easier to clean, and got to work. He watched her the entire time. Not the wound. Or the way her hands moved. No trembling, no hesitation. The clean confidence of someone who had been trained for exactly this kind of moment. The way she muttered instructions to herself quietly in a mix of English and Yoruba when she was thinking. The way she didn't fill silence with nervous talking. She was simply present. Completely, fully present in a way that most people in his world had never been. Everyone around Park Seo-jin always had an agenda running beneath their surface. An angle. Performance. Even Scarlett, beautiful, perfect Scarlett who had been with him for 2 years, was always slightly sideways, always positioned, always aware of how the light was hitting her. Joy was not performing anything. She was just real. Aggressively, disarmingly real. "This is going to sting," she said, not looking up. "It already stings. This is going to sting more." He didn't make a sound. She glanced up at him then. Just briefly. "Most people hiss at least. I'm not most people." "No," she agreed quietly, looking back down. "I'm getting that." Silence for a moment. Then he said, "Why did you help me?" She didn't answer immediately. Her hands kept working, cleaning, closing, covering. Then she said, "Because you were bleeding. That's the only reason I need." "You didn't ask what I'd done to end up bleeding. Does it matter right now?" He paused. "It might. Later. Then we'll deal with it later." She tied off the bandage and sat back on her heels, looking at him directly for the first time since they'd gotten inside. Up close in proper light he was. She registered it and immediately filed it away. Devastatingly handsome. The structured jaw, the dark eyes that seemed to process everything at a frequency slightly above normal, the kind of face that looked like it had been drawn by someone who was angry at ordinary faces. She stood up, washed her hands. "You need fluids and rest," she said. "You can take the couch. In the morning you can leave and we never have to see each other again." He was still watching her. That same quiet calculation. "And if I don't want to never see you again?" She turned from the sink and looked at him. Something about the question hung in the air between them, weightier than it should have been for 2 strangers at 1 in the morning. "Get some rest, Mr. Park," she said. She turned off the bathroom light and left him there. Across the city, Scarlett set her phone back on the marble countertop. She had seen the missed calls now. 4 of them. All from Seo-jin's private number. She picked up her wine glass instead and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window of the penthouse apartment he paid for, looking out at Seoul spread below her like a circuit board. Millions of lights, millions of lives, none of them her problem. She told herself he was fine. She told herself he always was. She took a sip of wine and did not call back. What Scarlett didn't know, what she couldn't have known in that moment of comfortable, cowardly silence, was that the missed calls were not Seo-jin being dramatic. They were not a test. They were not another power move in the exhausting chess game their relationship had become. They were the sound of a man bleeding out in an alley. And someone else had already answered. By the time Seo-jin's second-in-command, a compact, watchful man named Min-jun, tracked his boss's location to a small apartment in Mapogu just after 3 a.m., the crisis was already over. Min-jun stood outside the door for a long moment after getting the GPS coordinates. Then he called the number. Seo-jin picked up on the second ring. Voice low, controlled. Like he hadn't just bled through a dress shirt 3 hours ago. "I'm fine," he said before Min-jun could speak. "Don't come in. Don't knock. Stand down until morning." "Boss." "Stand down, Min-jun." "There's a woman in that apartment." "Yes." "Who is she?" Seo-jin looked across the small living room at the closed bedroom door behind which Joy Adeyemi was sleeping. Having given him her couch, her spare blanket, a glass of water, and absolutely nothing else. Someone who doesn't know what she just walked into, he said quietly. He hung up. He lay back against the cushions. The wound pulled when he breathed too deeply. The apartment was warm and smelled like something home-cooked, and somewhere a small fan was running its low, steady sound. Park Seo-jin, who had not slept soundly in 11 years, closed his eyes. And slept. Joy woke up and forgot, for exactly 4 seconds, that there was a Korean mafia boss sleeping on her couch. Then she remembered. She lay still in her bed, staring at the ceiling, doing the quiet internal accounting that she did every morning. Listing facts, grounding herself, making sure the world was still arranged the way she'd left it. Fact 1. She had found a bleeding stranger in an alley. Fact 2. She had brought him home. Fact 3. She still did not fully understand why. She got up, wrapped herself in her housecoat, opened the bedroom door slowly. He was awake. Not just awake. Sitting up, jacket folded neatly on the armrest beside him, looking out her window at the early Seoul skyline with the expression of a man who had been awake for a while and had been using the time to think. The morning light cut across his face at an angle that was almost unreasonably beautiful. Joy noticed it and immediately felt irritated at herself for noticing it. He turned when he heard her. His eyes moved over her once, not the way men usually looked at her, not evaluating, not performing interest, more like filing, storing, the way you look at something you want to understand. You slept, she said. I slept, he agreed, like it surprised him too. How's the pain? Manageable. She moved to the kitchen. Small space, open to the living room, close enough that they could talk without raising their voices. She put the kettle on, got 2 mugs, then stopped, turned, and looked at him directly. Are you in danger right now? Is someone going to come to my door? He held her gaze. My people are outside. She blinked. Your people. They've been there since 3 a.m. They won't come in. You're safe. She turned back to the kettle, processing. Her hands were steady, she made note of that herself. Her hands were steady and her voice when she spoke again was steady too. When you say your people, you know what I am, he said quietly. Not a question. She was quiet for a moment. I looked you up at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. And she poured the hot water, brought both mugs to the coffee table, sat down across from him in the small armchair, pulled her housecoat tighter and looked at him. And I still gave you the couch, she said. Something moved across his face. Slow like weather changing. Most people would have called the police. Most people would have walked past you in the alley. She wrapped both hands around her mug. I'm not most people either. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that meant something was being decided between 2 people without either of them saying it out loud. Seo-jin reached for his mug. His fingers were long, precise. She noticed the small scar across his right knuckle, the single silver ring on his index finger, the way he held the mug carefully like it was smaller than he was used to. Everything about him was oversized for her small apartment. Not just physically, his presence. The weight of him in a room. Like gravity works slightly differently in his vicinity. You're not afraid of me, he said. I didn't say that. You're not acting afraid of me. She met his eyes. I've worked trauma for 5 years. I've held people while they died. I've had family members scream in my face. I've sat with people in the worst moments of their lives. He paused. You're dangerous, Mr. Park. I'm not naive. But dangerous doesn't scare me the way it used to. He studied her. What does scare you? The question was too perceptive. Too direct. She felt it land somewhere private and looked away briefly. Out the window at her mother's photo, at anything else. Irrelevance, she said finally. Doing nothing when I could do something. He was quiet for a moment. Then very quietly. Is that why you stopped? She looked back at him. Yes. Another silence. But this one had a different texture. Softer at the edges. Joy, he said. Her name in his mouth sounded different than it did anywhere else. Lower. More deliberate. Like he had tasted it first before saying it out loud. I don't say thank you easily. I noticed. I'm saying it now. She held his gaze. Felt something warm move through her chest that she immediately didn't trust. You're welcome, Mr. Park. Seo-jin. What? Call me Seo-jin. You put your hands on my wound at midnight. Mr. Park is too far away for that. Despite everything, despite the absurdity of the situation, the tension, the unanswered questions stacking up quietly between them, Joy felt the corner of her mouth pull upward. Just slightly. Just enough. Seo-jin, she said. He looked at her like she had given him something. He should have left after the coffee. That was the plan. His plan, Min-jun's plan, the logical plan. Get up, thank the woman, leave, pretend this alley in Mapogu never happened. He had a world to return to. Meetings. Consequences. Enemies who would be watching how he handled last night's ambush. Because it had been an ambush, a calculated one, and someone in his inner circle had talked. He should have left. Instead he said, "Do you have food?" Joy looked at him. "Are you asking me to cook for you? I'm asking if you have food. There's a difference. Is there?" He almost smiled. "I'll cook." He stared. "You cook? Why is that surprising?" "Because you run," she gestured vaguely. "Whatever it is you run. Powerful men eat," he said simply, already moving toward her kitchen like he had decided, and that was the end of the discussion. She sat and watched Park Seo-jin, wounded, impeccably composed, absurdly out of place among her mismatched mugs and encre dish towels, open her fridge and assess its contents with the focused expression of a man who took everything seriously, including eggs. He made them both breakfast. Simple eggs, toast, the sliced tomatoes she had in a bowl on the counter. He moved quietly, efficiently. No performance. Just a man who knew how to feed himself and had decided, for reasons he wasn't explaining, to extend that to her. She ate across from him in silence. It was the most domestic, most surreal, most oddly peaceful morning she had experienced in 8 months. "You're going to have to tell me," she said finally, "what happened last night. Not for me. For your safety. Whoever did that to you is already being handled." Seo-jin. He looked up at the sound of his name in her mouth. She noticed he always did that. Registered it just slightly. "Someone in my organization gave information to my enemies," he said. His voice didn't change but his eyes did. Something cold moved through them. "Last night was the result. It won't happen again. And you. I'm fine. You lost significant blood and you slept on a stranger's couch. The stranger's couch was comfortable. I'm serious. So am I." He held her gaze. "I'm fine, Joy. Because of you." The way he said it stopped her. Not dramatically. Not with any performance attached to it. As plainly. Directly. The way a man who never said more than he meant said the exact thing he meant. She looked down at her plate. Felt that warmth again in her chest and this time didn't try to name it. He left at 9 a.m. The door he stopped. Turned back. She was leaning against the kitchen counter with her arms crossed, watching him go with an expression she had carefully made neutral. "I want to see you again," he said. "That's not a good idea. I know. Your life is. I know what my life is." She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them moved. "I don't want to be something that happens to you," she said quietly. "I don't want to be a chapter in someone's complicated story." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "What if I want you to be the whole story?" The words landed between them like something dropped from a great height. Joy felt her breath do something she didn't authorize it to do. She looked away first. Which was its own kind of answer. "Get some rest," she said. "Have someone check those stitches in 48 hours. He nodded. Opened the door. "Joy." She looked up. "You're the first person in a very long time," he said, "who looked at me and saw a person." He left before she could respond. She stood in her small warm apartment for a long time after the door closed. Her coffee going cold in her hand. Her heart doing something loud and complicated in her chest. Outside, 3 black vehicles pulled quietly away from the curb. before we go any further into this story, because trust me, it is about to get so much more intense, I want to hear from you right now. Drop a comment and tell me. Do you think Joy should let Seo-jin back in, or walk away before it's too late? And where in the world are you watching from? I read every single comment. If you've been here from the beginning and you haven't subscribed yet, now is the moment. Hit that button and the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. This story is just getting started. Scarlett found out on a Wednesday. Not from Seo-jin. He hadn't called her since that night. 4 days of silence that she had interpreted, in the particular way that Scarlett interpreted everything, as a power move. A punishment for something. She had been running through her mental catalogue of recent conversations, recent dinners, recent performances, trying to locate the moment she had miscalculated. She never once considered the missed calls. It was one of Seo-jin's junior associates, a young man named Taeyong who was too eager and too loose with information, who let it slip at a dinner she wasn't supposed to be at. Something about the boss spending the night in Mapo-gu. Something about a woman. A foreign woman. A nurse. Scarlett smiled the entire time he was talking. That was the thing about Scarlett that people consistently underestimated. Her danger was not in her anger. It was in her stillness. She smiled, excused herself gracefully, got into her car, and sat in the parking garage for 6 minutes doing absolutely nothing. Then she made a call. Joy felt the shift before she understood it. Small things at first. A man she didn't recognize standing near the hospital entrance 2 mornings in a row. A feeling of being watched on her walk home. Not paranoid, she was too grounded for paranoia, but present. Real. The specific prickling at the back of the neck that the body uses to communicate what the mind hasn't caught up to yet. Then on Thursday evening, walking out of the hospital's back exit, the same alley, the same route, she found a white envelope on the ground directly in her path. Her name on the front. Not her full name. Joy. Handwritten. Clean. Inside was a single card. No signature. 4 words. Leave Seoul. While you can. She stood in the alley holding it. The cold November air moved around her. She thought about the man who had bled here 6 days ago. She thought about eggs on her stove and a silver ring on an index finger, and what if I want you to be the whole story? She put the card in her coat pocket. She went home. She did not leave Seoul. Seo-jin called that night. She almost didn't pick up. She sat looking at his name on her screen for 4 full rings, having an argument with herself that she already knew she was losing. Then she answered. You need to tell me something, she said instead of hello. You got a message. Her stomach dropped, not because she was surprised. Because the fact that he already knew meant she had been right. She was already inside something. Already surrounded by walls she hadn't seen going up. How do you know that? Because I have people watching your building. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. Something controlled with effort. I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry. Joy sat down on her couch. Lowly. Why are people watching my building? Because after what happened in the alley, anyone connected to me becomes a target until I've dealt with the situation. And have you dealt with it? I'm close. Seo-jin. Her voice was very quiet. Who sent the card? Silence. Who sent it? She repeated. Someone who feels threatened. By me. The disbelief in her voice was genuine. I'm a nurse from Lagos. I don't. By what you represent to me, he said. The sentence fell into the space between them, and neither of them moved around it. Joy pressed her fingers to her forehead. Closed her eyes. I haven't even agreed to see you again. I know. We had coffee and eggs one time. I know. So why? Because, he said, and his voice shifted. Something dropped away from it, some layer of control, just slightly, just enough that she could hear what was underneath. The morning I woke up on your couch was the first time in 11 years I woke up somewhere and didn't immediately think about what I had to destroy that day. People who know me noticed the difference. Some of them don't like it. Joy opened her eyes. Stared at her ceiling. That's not fair, she whispered. You can't say things like that to me. I know that too. She exhaled, long and slow. What do you want from me, Seo-jin? Honestly. The pause that followed was the longest he had taken. Like he was choosing words with the same precision he applied to everything else. Like this answer mattered more than most things he said. I want to take you to dinner, he said finally. Somewhere real. Somewhere I don't have to explain or manage or perform. I want to sit across from you and talk like we did over coffee, and I want to do it without a gunshot wound as the reason. She almost laughed. She caught it but just barely. And the danger? She asked. I will handle the danger. You sound very certain. I am very certain about very few things, he said. You are one of them. She said yes. She told herself it was reckless. She had an entire conversation with herself in the mirror the next morning about sense and self-preservation and the particular foolishness of a woman who knew better. She listed every reason this was the wrong decision. She listed them clearly, logically, in order. Then she called her friend Busy, the only person from home she'd told anything real to since moving to Seoul, and told her what was happening. Busy was quiet for 4 seconds. Then, Joy Adeyemi, are you telling me a Korean mafia boss is in love with you? Nobody said love. He had people watching your building. That's not. Joy, baby. That man is gone for you. Busy. Wear the burgundy dress. The one with the shoulders. I'm not arguing about this. Joy laughed for the first time in days. Real laughter, the full kind, from the chest. She had forgotten how good it felt. He sent a car. Of course he did. Black, quiet. Driven by a man who said nothing and opened the door and closed it again with the efficiency of someone who had done this 10,000 times. Joy sat in the back in the burgundy dress. Busy had been right, obviously. And watched Seoul move past the windows and tried to remember the last time she had felt this particular combination of terrified and alive. The restaurant was small, private, tucked into a side street in Gangnam that didn't advertise itself. The kind of place that existed specifically for people who didn't want to be seen. A hostess led her to a corner table and Seo-jin was already there, standing when she came in, which she hadn't expected, in a dark suit with no tie, looking at her like she was the only thing in the room worth looking at. She felt the full weight of that look from across the room. She walked toward him anyway. You came, he said. I came, she confirmed. He pulled out her chair. She sat. He sat across from her. For a moment they just looked at each other, taking inventory, adjusting to the reality of each other outside of crisis and emergency. He looked different here. Still powerful, still that particular gravitational intensity, but softer around the edges. Or maybe she was just learning to see past the surface. You look, he started. Don't, she said. He raised an eyebrow. If you say something smooth right now, I'm going to be suspicious of all of it. She opened her menu. Just talk to me like a person. Something broke open in his expression. Not a smile exactly. More than a smile. Like she had said exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment, and he hadn't known how much he needed to hear it. Okay, he said. And opened his menu. They talked for 3 hours. Not about his world. Not about the danger or the card or the missed calls or Scarlett. None of it. They talked about Busan, where he grew up, the fish market his grandfather used to take him to at 5 a.m. on Saturdays. They talked about Lagos, Joy's mother's cooking, the specific chaos of a Nigerian Christmas that she described so vividly. He leaned forward without realizing it. They talked about what it felt like to be responsible for things, him for his empire, her for lives, and how that weight settled differently depending on the day. They talked about loss. Not deeply, not yet, but around the edges of it, testing the water. He told her his father had died when he was 19, that the empire had come to him unasked for, inherited through blood and circumstance, and that he had spent 15 years becoming something his father's enemies would fear because it was the only language that world understood. She told him about her father, 8 months ago, how she still reached for her phone to call him when something good happened. He didn't say he was sorry in the automatic, deflective way people usually did. He just looked at her, really looked, and said, "He raised someone extraordinary." She pressed her lips together, looked at the table for a moment, then back at him. "You can't keep doing that," she said quietly. "Doing what?" "Saying the exact right thing. I'm just saying what's true." "I know," she said. "That's the problem." His hand moved across the table, slowly, deliberately, and covered hers. She looked down at it. His hand over hers, his ring, his scar, his careful fingers. She thought about those same hands gripping her wrist in an alley, letting go when she asked. She thought about how much could change in 6 days. She turned her hand over beneath his and held on. Outside the restaurant, in a black car parked 40 meters up the street, Scarlett sat in the back seat looking at a photograph her contact had just sent her. And a woman. Across a candlelit table, his hand over hers. Scarlett had seen Seo-jin at 100 dinners. Business dinners, strategic dinners, the performative social occasions that were really just power negotiations in expensive clothes. She had sat across from him at many of them. She knew his face at those tables. Closed, calculating, present but distant. The face of a man who was always 3 moves ahead, and none of them were about the person in front of him. The man in this photograph was not that man. The man in this photograph was looking at this woman, just looking at her, like nothing else in the room existed, like nothing else needed to. Scarlett had loved Seo-jin the way you love something you've decided to own, completely and on her terms. She had never once seen him look at her the way he was looking at this woman in a burgundy dress who was. She zoomed in, laughing. Actually laughing, head slightly tilted. The completely unguarded laugh of someone who had forgotten to be careful. Something moved through Scarlett. Cold and sharp and deeply, dangerously personal. She put the phone down. "Find out everything about her," she said to the man in the front seat. Then, quietly to herself. Everything. What Scarlett didn't know, what she couldn't see from 40 meters away in a darkened car, was that at that exact moment, inside the restaurant, Seo-jin had leaned across the table toward Joy and said something he had not said to anyone in a very long time. "I want to protect you. Not because you need it. 'Cause you matter to me. And I don't say that easily." Joy looked at him for a long moment. The candlelight between them. The noise of the city muffled outside. His eyes. Dark, steady, terrifyingly sincere. "I'm not someone you can keep, Seo-jin," she said softly. "Not the way you keep things in your world." "I know." His thumb moved across her knuckles. Low. Deliberate. "I want to try anyway. Different way. Your way." She searched his face. Looking for the performance. Looking for the angle. Finding neither. "This is going to get complicated," she said. "Everything worth anything is complicated." Outside, Scarlett's car pulled away from the curb. Inside, Joy made her second decision in 6 days that she would replay 1,000 times. She didn't let go of his hand. The betrayal came from inside. Not Scarlett. That was the twist nobody saw coming. Not Min-jun, not the inner circle, not even Seo-jin, who had built his entire empire on the ability to read people accurately. The person who had sold information to his enemies. The person who had orchestrated the ambush in the alley. The person who had been feeding coordinates, schedules, vulnerabilities to the one syndicate powerful enough to make a move on Park Seo-jin. It was Taeyong, the eager young associate. The one who had told Scarlett about Joy at that dinner. Except Taeyong hadn't told Scarlett accidentally. He had told her deliberately. Because Scarlett had been working with Seo-jin's enemies for 8 months. Because the relationship, the beautiful, curated, perfectly positioned relationship, had never been about love. It had been about access. About proximity to power. About being close enough to the center of Park Seo-jin's world to map it completely and hand that map to the people who wanted him gone. Scarlett and Taeyong. Together. For 8 months. While Seo-jin sat across dinner tables from her and trusted the silence she'd perfected. Min-jun brought the evidence on a Friday morning. Laid it on Seo-jin's desk without speaking. Phone records, bank transfers, a series of encrypted messages decoded by their tech team over 72 hours. He stood back and watched his boss look at it. Seo-jin went through every page slowly. Methodically. His face did not change. That was the most frightening thing Min-jun had ever witnessed in 11 years of working for this man. Not rage, not disbelief. Just that terrible, absolute stillness. When he finished, he closed the folder. "Where is she?" he asked. "Penthouse," Min-jun said. "She doesn't know we know." Seo-jin stood. Straightened his jacket. Looked out the window at Seoul for a long moment. His city, his empire, the thing he had bled for and killed for and sacrificed every soft thing inside himself to build. Then he turned from the window. "Bring her in," he said. "Bring Taeyong too." Joy knew something had happened before he told her. He called that afternoon. Not a long call, not the kind they'd been having every evening since the restaurant dinner. Conversations that stretched past midnight and ranged from serious to ridiculous, that had become, without either of them formally deciding it, the best part of her day. This call was short. "Are you safe?" he asked first. Always that first now. "Yes. Are you?" Pause that told her everything. "I need to handle something tonight. I wanted to hear your voice first." She sat down. Something in her chest moved. "Seo-jin, talk to me. I found out who was behind the alley." She waited. It was Scarlett. The name landed like a stone dropped into still water. Joy felt the ripples move through her. Not jealousy, something more complex than that. Grief almost. For him. For what it meant to discover that the person closest to you was the architecture of your near-death. Seo-jin. "I'm okay," he said. Automatic. She recognized it as the thing he said when he wasn't okay but had decided not to perform the alternative. "You don't have to be okay right now," she said quietly. Silence. "She was with me for 2 years," he said finally. His voice very low. I'm not," he stopped. Started again. "I chose wrong. For a long time I chose wrong. You trusted someone. That's not the same as choosing wrong. In my world. In any world," she said firmly, "trusting someone is not a failure. What they do with that trust, that's on them. Not you." He was quiet for a long time. She could hear him breathing. Could picture him standing at whatever window in whatever building he was in, looking at his city, carrying this new weight. "Joy," he said. "I'm here. I know. That's the only thing making this bearable right now. That you're there." She closed her eyes. Felt the full warmth of that land in her chest, and this time she did not file it away or distrust it or argue with it. "Handle what you need to handle," she said. "Then come here." Another silence. Softer this time. "Yeah," he said. "Yes," she said. "I'll be up." The confrontation with Scarlett was not dramatic in the way people imagine these things. There were no raised voices. No breaking things. Seo-jin sat at the head of the table in the private room of his headquarters, Scarlett across from him, Taeyong 2 seats down, not looking at anyone. The evidence was between them. Scarlett looked at it for a long time. Then she looked up at Seo-jin. "You were never going to love me," she said. And the thing that stopped everyone in the room, Min-jun, the 2 other men standing at the walls, was that she didn't sound angry. She sounded exhausted. Like she had been holding something very heavy for a very long time and had finally decided to set it down regardless of what it cost her. "I knew that from the beginning. I told myself it didn't matter. That power was enough. That being next to you was enough." She glanced at the folder. "I was wrong about that too." Seo-jin looked at her for a long moment. "You could have left." "I know. You didn't have to." "I know, Seo-jin." Her voice cracked. Just slightly. Just once. Then she straightened. Composed herself the way she always did. Like pulling a mask back into position. "I know." He looked at her for a long time. Something moved across his face that wasn't anger and wasn't forgiveness. Something in between. Something human. "You'll have 24 hours to leave Seoul," he said. "After that I can't promise anything." Scarlett nodded. Good. Smoothed her dress. At the door she paused without turning around. "The woman," she said quietly. "She saved you." "Yes. Don't waste that." Left. The twist nobody had seen coming was not Scarlett's involvement. It was what Taeyong revealed when Scarlett was gone, sitting across from Seo-jin with the particular energy of a man who has calculated that his only remaining asset is information. "There's something else," Taeyong said. Min-jun stepped forward. Seo-jin raised a hand. "Wait." "The nurse," Taeyong said. "The African woman. She wasn't random." The room went very still. "What?" Seo-jin said. "One word. Flat and absolute." "The alley wasn't random either," Taeyong continued, words coming faster now. "The specific acceleration of someone who knows they're already past the point of no return. We were supposed to. The original plan was to make sure you ended up somewhere specific that night. Somewhere without your usual people. The ambush site was chosen because of the hospital nearby. Because of the staff exit." He swallowed. "We knew a foreign nurse used that route every night. The plan was to use her as leverage. Later. Once you were all ready." "Stop," Seo-jin said. "Jung, stop." The silence in that room was the loudest thing Min-jun had ever heard. Seo-jin stood very slowly. He walked to the window. Stood there with his back to the room. Outside Seoul moved through its ordinary Friday evening. Lights, traffic, 10 million people living lives that had nothing to do with this room. Joy had not been a coincidence. She had been selected, identified, positioned. The plan had been to use her, her kindness, her instinct to help, her predictable route home, as an instrument. Not knowing. Never knowing. Except the plan had broken down. Because the people who had planned it had not factored in one variable. That she would actually save him. That he would actually let her. That something would happen in that alley that no blueprint had accounted for. Something real, something unscripted. Something that had proceeded to rearrange everything in Park Seo-jin's interior world in ways that a knife wound never could. They had tried to use Joy as a weapon against him. Instead, she had become the reason he wanted to be something different. He turned from the window. "Take care of it," he said to Min-jun. His voice was very quiet. The quietest Min-jun had ever heard it. "All of it." He picked up his jacket from the chair. And he left. Joy was awake when he knocked. She opened the door and he was standing there. No entourage, no black cars visible, just him. Jacket in his hand. Something on his face she hadn't seen before. Not the controlled intensity, not the careful composure. Something stripped back. Raw at the edges. Tired in the way only the truth can make you tired. She stepped aside without a word. He came in. Sat on the couch. Her couch, the one he'd slept on. The one that still seemed slightly too small for him in a way that was somehow endearing. He set his jacket down. Put his elbows on his knees. Pressed both hands over his face for a moment. She went to the kitchen. Made tea. Brought it back. Sat beside him, close but not crowding. Present in the way she was always present. Giving him the room to be whatever he needed to be without performing anything back at him. He lowered his hands. Looked at the mug she'd placed in front of him. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Okay." He told her everything. Plan. Yeah. The alley. What she had been intended for. He watched her face as he said it. Not looking away, not softening it. She deserved the full, unedited version, and he gave it to her. Joy listened without interrupting. Her hands around her mug. Her face going through things he could see but couldn't fully read. Shock, then something colder, then something that moved like grief, then something that settled slowly into the expression of a woman who was choosing, in real time, how to hold information that could break her. When he finished, the room was very quiet. "They chose me," she said. "Because I would stop." "Yes." "Because they knew I wouldn't walk past someone bleeding." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "They picked me because I was exactly who I am." "Yes." His voice was rough. "And I'm." "Don't apologize," she said. Not harshly, just firmly. She turned to look at him. "You didn't plan it. You didn't know. And when you found out, you came here and told me yourself." She held his gaze. "That matters. Joy. I'm not finished." She set her mug down. Turned to face him fully. "I'm angry. I want you to know that. Not at you, at the situation. At the idea that my kindness was something someone could look at and see a liability. That helping people made me a target. She shook her head. But here is what I also know. He paused. I don't regret stopping. Not for 1 second. Because what happened after, the coffee, the eggs, the dinner, the phone calls, that was real. Nobody planned that part. That was just us. He looked at her. The rawness on his face was something she felt in her own chest. You are the most extraordinary person I have ever met, he said. She exhaled. Seo-jin. I mean it. He turned toward her fully. I have been in rooms with presidents and criminals and everyone in between. I have never met anyone like you. And I know what my world is. I know what I am. I know that being near me costs something, and I would not ask you to pay that cost without understanding it completely. His eyes held hers. Steady. Certain. But I am asking you to let me show you that I can be something worth the cost. Not because I'm powerful. Because you make me want to be better than that. Joy looked at him for a long time. She thought about her father, who had always told her that courage was not the absence of fear but the decision that something else mattered more. She thought about the alley. Envelope. The burgundy dress. The hand across the table that she had turned over and held. She thought about the word that Beezy had used on the phone. He is gone for you. She reached out. Put her hand against the side of his face. He went very still. The particular stillness of someone receiving something they had stopped believing they deserved. His eyes closed for just a moment. Show me then, she said softly. When he opened his eyes, she was still there. He leaned forward slowly and she didn't move away, and when his lips met hers it was the quietest, most certain thing. No performance, no strategy, just two people choosing each other in a small warm apartment that smelled like shea butter and home. Outside, Seoul moved through its night. Indifferent, bright, enormous. Inside, something that had started in blood and crisis and a stranger's instinct to stop, completed itself. Became something neither of them had planned for. Became the whole story. Some loves are not supposed to happen. They arrive the wrong way, at the wrong time, wrapped in the wrong circumstances, and they ask you anyway. They ask you to be brave enough to choose them despite everything the world says about who belongs with whom, what makes sense, what is safe. Joy and Seo-jin were never supposed to make sense. They made sense anyway. So here is what I want to know from you, and I mean this because the comments on this story are going to be everything. Do you think Joy made the right choice staying? Or did she walk into something she can never walk back from? And what did you think about Scarlett? Villain or just a woman who loved wrong and handled it worse? Tell me everything. Drop it all in the comments right now. If this story moved you, if you felt even one moment of it in your chest, share it. Send it to someone who needs a story like this today. And if you are not subscribed yet, then you have been watching this channel like a guest and it is time to come home. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, and come back for the next story because I promise you, it is going to be even better than this one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for feeling this with me. This has been Afro-K Romance Fairy Tale. And we are just getting started.